If you guys want to talk about the worst mom in the history of moms, let's talk about the case of Diane Downs, who literally attempted to murder all 3 of her children in order to get a man to fall in love with her. So what exactly creates a monster like this? Well, Diane was born August 7th of 1955 in Phoenix, Arizona. Most of her life, she was pretty well behaved, but she started to rebel against her parents around high school. She cut her hair, had a really edgy phase, and got super boy crazy. And she started to date guys, which was way outside of her strict family's rules. And she fell in love with a boy named Steve Downs. They were high school sweethearts, but the second that college hit, they ended up going separate ways. He joined the Navy, and she went to Pacific Coast Baptist Bible College. And while they said that they would stay faithful to each other, she immediately started to hook up with other guys when she got there, and was expelled for her promiscuous behavior, and had to go back and live with her strict parents. While Steve came back, he forgave her, and they ended up running away together and getting married on November 13th of 1973. They were known to fight constantly. But in 1974, they had their first child together, making everything worse. Part 2 to the Diane Downs case. Well, the marriage between her and Steve was beyond rocky, and having their first daughter together, Christy, did not help that improve. And 6 months after she was born, Diane ended up leaving Christy with her dad so she could join the Navy, which only lasted 3 weeks because she had to leave for severe blisters. They had another kid in 1976 named Cheryl, and Steve had a vasectomy immediately after this, but then Diane was pregnant again. So I guess you can imagine how that happened. She did not go through with the pregnancy, but her and Steve stayed together. Later, they moved to Mesa, Arizona, got new jobs, and Diane was having affairs with all of her new co-workers. Got pregnant again, kept this one, and had a boy named Danny. Steve actually still decided to stay for the sake of the kids, and wanted to remain a father figure to Danny. But eventually, they ended up getting divorced in 1980. And this is when things got significantly more unstable. Diane started to bounce from relationship to relationship, moving in and out with different men, and then decided to become a surrogate in order to make money, even though she didn't pass all the psychiatric exams. Terrifying. But everything changed when she met a man named Nick. Part 3 to the Diane Downs case. So this is when Diane met Robert Knickenbocker, who went by the name Nick. And she swore that this man was the love of her life. He had separated from his wife and describes the relationship as being intense and overwhelming. He eventually broke it off with her though because he didn't like kids. And this is when Diane became devastated and angry at her own children for getting in the way of her love. Her kids and her moved to Cottage Grove, Oregon, but still couldn't seem to forget Nick. She would obsessively write to him, and she really stopped paying attention to her kids' health. They often went hungry, went without coats in the cold. It was even said by a neighbor that Cheryl had mentioned that she was scared of her mom. Well, on Thursday, May 19th of 1983, everything went down. This story is from her perspective, by the way. They were coming home from a friend's house whenever Diane decided to take the kids on a scenic route. They did this often to explore. Hungry Like the Wolf started to play on the radio, and this is when she noticed a bushy-haired stranger signaling her over from the middle of the road. And at 10 p.m., with her kids asleep in the back of the car, she got out to talk to him, and he immediately demanded for her keys. Part 4 to the Diane Downs case. So immediately after this stranger demanded for her keys, they had some sort of a struggle, in which he shoots all 3 of her kids and then shoots her in the left arm. In order to distract him, she pretends to throw her keys in the bush, and then uses the keys that are actually in her hand to turn on the car and then drive wildly like a lunatic to the hospital. So she pulls up to this hospital with her kids in bad condition, and all of the medical professionals that were there that night were shocked by her reactions. Her daughter Cheryl ended up passing away, and Danny and Christy were literally clinging to life. And she showed no emotion at all. Not only had she wrapped her own gun wound and not her kids', but she was worried about her new car having blood on it. She seemed relieved that Cheryl was dead, and was shocked when she found out that Danny, her 3-year-old child, had been paralyzed. And she was only shocked because he wasn't hit in the heart. Christy had had a stroke, but she was still alive, so currently Diane was the only witness. And a lot of moms actually felt for her during this time, and were even scared to leave with this man on the loose. But the public opinion didn't last for long. Part 5 to the Diane Downs case. Even though the police were already suspicious of Diane, because she was the only witness, they had to rule out her story. So they got a composite sketch of the guy, and they ended up searching the whole area, where they only found some bullet casings. And her interviews during this time, if you guys have ever seen them, are so weird, definitely worth watching. This woman was eating up the attention so much, and she made the story into this whole overcoming thing where like she battled the patriarchy, ended up actually getting away from this man, like she's kind of the hero in the situation, but didn't show any emotion towards her kids. She went on the Oprah show and would crack jokes and have the crowd laughing. So the police ended up asking her to do a reenactment of this event. And it's truly one of the weirdest videos that you will ever see because she seems like she's having fun. Any mom being put through this would have found this to be extremely traumatic to relive this event. Instead, she's having fun, smirking, checking herself out in the car mirror, ends up hitting her arm on the steering wheel and says, "That almost hurt as bad as when," and cuts herself off. And it seems like she was about to say, "as when I shot myself." Part 6 to the Diane Downs case. So after seeing this horrific reenactment, people just flat out are not believing her anymore, especially whenever she said this whole thing took place in like 5 to 10 seconds. And she did not take the criticism very well, literally stating, if I had shot my own children, wouldn't I have done a good job of it? She's literally gaslighting people who are letting her know that things aren't adding up. Back at the hospital, Christy is starting to improve a lot, but she's still nonverbal. Her mom ends up coming to visit her actually, and her heart spikes. So the police are starting to want to have her as a witness, and they immediately get her in with a therapist. They practice by her writing down the shooter on a piece of paper and her throwing it into a fire, until eventually she feels safe enough to give it to the therapist. And once she did, it said her mom. The police went to go check Diane's house, found bullet casings that matched those at the crime scene, and also found a diary with intros about Robert, and talking about how Robert doesn't want kids. So then the police had their motive. Which Oprah even brought up to her that the man was now afraid of her because he thought she had shot her own kids. She tried to change her story a few more times, but she ended up getting arrested. Part 7 to the Diane Downs case. So by the time it was time for her trial, she was pregnant again. She said she did it because she missed her kids and was lonely. But honestly, I feel like she did it just because she thought her sentence wouldn't be as bad. They ended up playing the song Hungry Like the Wolf in the courtroom, and Diane was jamming out to it. They showed the tapes, and she showed no emotion. They even did a doll reenactment for the jury to paint a picture. And then Christy testified, saying that her mom had actually stopped the car when she thought they were all asleep, went to the trunk, came around, and ended up shooting them. Cheryl first, Danny second, and her last. Wrapped herself in a towel and proceeded to drive slowly to the hospital. So ultimately, Diane was found guilty. And to this day, she is still in complete denial, thinking that she is still innocent. She ended up having the baby girl in jail, and she was immediately taken from her. This daughter was adopted, and Danny and Christy were actually adopted by one of the prosecutors on the case. Overall, it was a pretty happy ending. But Diane actually successfully broke out of jail for a little bit. If you want to hear that story, come over to my Instagram. It'll be on my middle reels tab. Something that is just a weird fear of mine is doctors pretending to be doctors. Like not actually having their licensure, but just playing the role and secretly killing people while doing so. And yes, this has happened before. The most haunted hotel in America is known as the Crescent Hotel. I don't know if anybody else can relate to this, but I loved staying up at night watching ghost hunters. I would run around with my little EMF detector seeing if I could find ghosts myself. Well, my favorite episode of Ghost Hunters actually covered the Crescent. They ended up actually making contact with one of the ghosts, but I never really deep dived into how creepy this hotel's history actually is. So the Crescent Hotel was built in 1986. And it was a resort for the wealthy, rich, and powerful. But pretty fast, they found this whole hotel to be very unmanageable. And it was weirdly very accident-prone in the building process. There was a stonemason named Michael who passed away, but we'll get to that later. Well, it reopened in 1908 as a college for girls. This photo gives me very much Midsummer vibes. While this college was considered prestige, they covered up a death. Part 2 to the Crescent Hotel. Well, one of the girls in this conservatory ended up falling for a guy. She ended up getting pregnant, and it was a huge deal during this time to be unwed and pregnant. On top of this, her dad forbade her from being with him. So she threw herself off the top of the building. The college completely covered it up, went about their business, and kept up with their high-priced tuition. But they only lasted until 1924. While all the way in Iowa, a man named Norman Baker was a radio host. Very eccentric, had a big personality. And while there isn't a whole lot of information on how he came to this conclusion, he decided that he was going to be a doctor without any kind of license or experience. He claimed that he had discovered a variety of cures to numerous diseases, but it didn't take long for Iowa to figure out that he did not have the medical training, so they ran him out. Well, Mr. Baker was not giving up. And on his ventures where he could find a new place where he could cure people, he came across the Crescent. And in 1937, he opened the Baker's Cancer Curing Hospital. Hundreds of people checked into this hospital and hundreds did not check out. Part 4 of the Crescent Hotel. So you can still go down to this basement and look at all the gurneys, the wheelchairs, the medical equipment, along with a ton of jars. Some of these are filled with his concoction, some are filled with human remains. And as they've continued to build along the area, they have found more of Norman's things. Just as recent as 2019, they were excavating the area and ended up finding 500 items that included more jars filled with human remains like tumors and also more of his little cure. As you can imagine, with all of the death that happened here, this place is extremely haunted. Listed as being one of the top hotels you don't want to stay at. There's so many accounts of people staying here and talking about their experience along with photos online, and people sharing just how frightening it is. Well, besties, I think we should go stay there. It's only 3 hours away from me, so I'm going to get in the car and I'm going to go drive. And I will be vlogging my experience for YouTube, which is linked in my bio. But in the meantime, if you want to hear about the specific ghosts that haunt this hotel, go to my Instagram, go to the middle reels tab. It's really interesting and you get to learn how people outside of the hospital passed away. Imagine resorting to murdering your spouse after only 8 days of marriage. Today, we're going to be talking about the murder of Cody Johnson. To give a little bit of backstory into his life, he was born on April 8th, 1998, was very outdoorsy, loved cars, got a career in making custom commercial cars, and his boss was his best friend. He had an awesome relationship with his family, with his friends, an amazing job that he loved, but all he really wanted was a wife to go along with it. Well, in Halloween of 2011, he met Jordan Graham. She was a huge Christian, very active in the church, but she was also very shy and reserved. But this attracted Cody to her. They were like yin and yang, perfect opposites. And Cody knew he was going to marry her after just a few weeks of knowing Jordan. He fell so hard, but a lot of their friends and family was noticing that Jordan wasn't falling quite as hard. And it's very important that I state that because of Jordan's religious views, celibacy was huge for her. So Jordan and Cody decided to buy a house and get married. It was very noticeable that Jordan was more excited about the wedding, though, than the marriage. And when it was time for the wedding, this is when things took a turn for the worse. Part 2 to the murder of Cody Johnson. Well, the day of the wedding hit and they had a custom song made for their wedding. And it stated things like, "You're my safe place to fall," "You help me to climb higher for a better view," and this is all a massive foreshadow. After their wedding, Cody took a week off of work as their honeymoon period to move into their new house. Well, the day before this honeymoon period was over was a Sunday, so they went to church, went to the lake, and went out to Dairy Queen with some friends. And this was the last time anyone heard from Cody. The next day occurred and he didn't show up to work. His boss, who again was also his best friend, was extremely worried. So worried that he went to his house, and when he knocked on the door for a while and no one answered, he resorted to breaking in. He was panicked, looked for evidence around the house, and found Cody's phone in the garage. But there was no sign of Jordan. Absolutely panicked, he called the police. Because of how worried his boss was, the police took this very seriously. They were also wondering why his wife didn't make this report. Well, the wife ended up texting a friend asking if they had seen Cody, saying that he drove off with out-of-town friends and didn't know where he went. Part 3 to the murder of Cody Johnson. So at this point, friends and family know that Cody is missing. So they go to Cody and Jordan's house to help. And when they're over there, Jordan just seems upset instead of happy that people are actually helping. At one point, she gets so upset that she throws her wedding ring. Well, obviously with this behavior, the police call her in to question her. They're like, "Hey, was there a fight?" She says no. They're like, "Well, do you think you know where he went?" She's like, "Well, he does like to go out on very fast joyrides," almost suggesting that they were going too fast and maybe crashed somewhere. She also said that she didn't make a missing persons report in case he came back and was upset with her. Well, the cops were potentially thinking that this was a drug deal gone wrong, because that wasn't uncommon for the area. Search parties were looking for Cody everywhere until an email came in. I'll insert this email now from Cody the Carman. And Jordan originally showed this email to her friend, and it was her friend who encouraged her to take this email to the cops instead of her just doing it herself. It stated that his body was in Glacier National Park, but when she took this to the police, she showed no emotion, but they still decided to search there. Part 4 to the murder of Cody Johnson. So whenever Jordan brought this email to them, she claimed that he did work with a Cody, and when they found this Cody and interviewed him, he said that he hadn't worked with him in a long time. He also was extremely cooperative and they couldn't find any evidence against him. They also could not tie that email to him. So they take their search to Glacier National Park. Jordan brings her friend Hannah and they walk around with a search party looking at different areas. But again, Jordan's very unemotional and not even helping. Her friend was just trying to be as supportive as possible. Well, they couldn't find him, so they went home, called it a day, and came back the next day. And Jordan brought her little brother with her. And as they're driving through, Hannah is suggesting places that the search party should go to. But Jordan ends up having another idea. She takes them on a very long road to the top where a parking lot is, and states that her and Cody went here a lot. This area was beautiful and scenic, but dangerous, and the rocks for the hikers were not approved. But everyone watched as Jordan jumped over the railing and onto the rocks, went to a specific edge of a small cliff, throws a rock over the edge, and states, "I think he's down there." Part 5 to the murder of Cody Johnson. So Jordan throws the rock over the edge and states, "OMG, it's him." Her little brother joins her and kind of looks over the edge, and it's just past the point that you can't see, but you can definitely see that something's down there, which traumatized her little brother, and he was so upset that he was physically crawling back to the car and crying. And again, Jordan was emotionless. And everyone was shocked by her behavior and the fact that she knew the right place to go. A member of the FBI had to actually climb down the tree by rope in order to confirm that there was a body down there before they even started the rescue mission, because of how dangerous the rescue mission would be. But once they were able to go there, they confirmed that it was him, he had his ID on him, and a helicopter had to come drop a 200-foot line to retrieve him. All of Cody's friends and family stated that he was afraid of heights, so he had to have been lured there. The police thought it was very suspicious that Jordan knew exactly where to go, and when questioned on this, she said the Holy Spirit just led her to this spot. Now they're super weirded out but still don't have evidence against her. And this is when her matron of honor ended up coming forward with text messages about Jordan being scared to get married. Part 6 to the murder of Cody Johnson. So the matron of honor ended up coming forward with all of these text messages, in which Jordan was saying that she was scared to get married and scared to lose her virginity. She was also crying the day of her wedding and stated that she would freak out if he even made a move on her. Well, I guess after they got married, she pretended like she was on her period. But obviously that lie can only last for so long, so she told her friend that she ended up telling Cody she didn't want to be with him anymore after 8 days of marriage, that they got into an argument and he left. So now the police know that she's telling different people different things. On top of that, they were able to trace the IP address of the email back to her stepdad's house. So that's when Jordan knew it was time to come clean. She said she told Cody she wasn't happy anymore and they got into a huge argument, but decided to cool off a little bit at the national park, in which they got into an altercation again and she pushed him off the cliff, which didn't surprise investigators at this point. Jordan then went to his funeral and was on her phone the entire time, and finally was arrested for first and second degree murder, but was only convicted for second degree and sentenced to 30 years. In which she didn't testify or apologize. Because of her Christian background, she made it seem like it was worse to just divorce. Okay, so who in the world would kill this beautiful Instagram influencer? Alexis Sharkey's death was just ruled as a homicide, and it has been on my brain all week. I'll be showing you guys how to do this look, so let's get into the case. So Alexis was extremely smart, very much an overachiever. She graduated top of her class at the University of Pittsburgh and had big dreams of going to med school. However, she wanted to travel in the meantime, so she decided to take a break. So she went to Texas to work at a Twin Peaks. She had no issues making friends, but recently went through a breakup. But one of the girls she worked with at Twin Peaks noticed a thing going on between her and a regular. This guy's name was Tom Sharkey. He was an oil field consultant and traveled a lot for his job, which was perfect because that's why she was taking a break from college. They began dating and she started to work for the hair company Monet, which a lot of you guys know to be a pyramid scheme. However, Miss Girl was so good at it. She was making $400,000 a year as an executive director and traveling and posting it everywhere. Because of this, her Instagram rose to 20,000 followers. She met a lot of new friends and eventually Tom proposed. Go to part 2 to see the rest of the look. Welcome back to the case of Alexis Sharkey. We're doing this makeup look, by the way. So Tom proposed to her and they moved to Colorado, and this is when she took up vlogging on YouTube. And they look absolutely precious. They seem like such a good couple. They seem like they're genuinely so happy in every single vlog, but the problem is you never really know what's truly going on based on social media. So her and Tom seem like the perfect couple. They get married, move to Houston together, and she joins Bumble BFF to make a new group of friends. She ends up finding a group that she meshes with really well and combining them with her Monet friends. Well, quarantine hits and she takes to TikTok. New way to promote yourself. Pretty much all of us went on TikTok after quarantine. So she was finally able to show more of her personality online, promote Monet, and she put Tom and her friends in it. You can still go look these up. And then her and one of her friends decided to go to Marfa, Texas, and then Tulum, Mexico. Keep this in mind. This is actually the last photo that she posted on her Instagram in Tulum. Anyways, by the time she got back, it was Thanksgiving, and she went to her friend Tanya's house for it. Without Tom, which is so strange for newlyweds. I forgot to mention that her friends would say that she would barely even bring up Tom, which is so sus, but go to part 3 for the events that unfold. Welcome back to part 3 of the case of Alexis Sharkey. We are doing this makeup look, and this is the part where everything happens. So she leaves her friend Tanya's house on Thanksgiving and lets Tanya know that she's going out to drink. She was picked up by a car, went out drinking until 3 a.m., and then texted Tanya on her way back to let her know she was coming back to pick up her car from her house. Well, the next day is Black Friday, which is a huge deal for people who run businesses, and she's obviously affiliated with Monet. And because she works from her phone, she's never off of it, like a story every other hour. All her friends wake up Black Friday, nothing. Nothing is on her social media. But that morning in the friend group chat, they get a text from her. She wanted to hang out and go out drinking, but none of them were free then, so they made plans for the next day. Well, the next day comes around, she doesn't show up, and no one's heard from her. So her husband Tom phones up John, one of her friend's boyfriends, and is like, hey, have you heard from Alexis? We got into a really bad fight last night, and I haven't seen her. She got into a black car, and I haven't seen her since. Sorry guys, here's the rhinestones. But his story kept changing. He would sometimes say she left in a black car, sometimes say she left on foot, would sometimes say that they had fought, would sometimes say that they didn't have a fight. She had her phone, didn't have her phone, or that he was even following her around on Find Friends. Go to the next part. Welcome to the next part of the case of Alexis Sharkey. We are finishing up this look. So it is obviously sus that Tom keeps changing his story. My eyes are headed, so I'm gonna have to go up on the crystals. But her friends are extremely worried. No answer on the group chat. They still hung out hoping that she would show up, but never showed up. But Tanya gets extremely worried and calls Alexis's mom Stacy. It turned out Tom already talked to Stacy, and this is how they knew everything was getting really, really bad. So they took to social media, started posting everywhere, justice for Lex. But sadly, her body ended up being found. She was on the side of the road, completely naked, only a few miles from where she lived. Let me just say, her mom and the rest of her friends were beyond broken over this news. It's really important to note, though, that there was no signs of trauma. And because she's so beautiful and active on social media, the internet went crazy. They were thinking possibly drugs are involved, maybe a smothering. But her friends and family knew that this was no accident. And that's when the friend that she went on the Marfa trip with stated that Tom and Alexis were actually going through a divorce, and Alexis said she was scared for her life. Go to the last part. Here's the last part of the Alexis Sharkey case. And we're almost done with this look. And again, this is just what her friend said, we don't know for sure. But her friend was coming out with all this stuff about Tom sending Alexis nasty messages while they were on their vacation together. And that in Tulum, she met a man named Sebastian. And she was very, very interested in the Sebastian guy, and he was actually the friend that ended up picking her up the night they went out drinking, before she was found dead. Well, there's a lot of rumors about them already being together, potentially Tom already knowing, but we don't really know for sure right now. Well, the medical examiner's conclusion was that she was strangled. So now the entire internet is suspicious of Tom. He's changed his story. He also referred to her in past tense before they found her body. But he's gotten an extreme amount of death threats and has kind of stayed away from being interviewed. He only did one quick phone interview and didn't even finish it. I'm sure his mental health is just awful right now. Weird thing to add to this is that he's the next of kin, so he was supposed to claim the body, but he ghosted Alexis's mom and never did. The medical examiner ended up giving her mom the power though, so they do have the body back now. And while there's a lot of people still suspicious of Tom, people are not shy to question Sebastian or her new Bumble friends. Let me know your thoughts in the comments.